Hello and welcome to Glastonbury.
Hello, thank you. Glad to be here.
Tell me who you are.
I'm Meghan Rice. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, USA, but I now live in Hertfordshire in England.
So how do you come to be so focused on Sheela-Na-Gigs?
Sheela-Na-Gigs. Came across a picture of her in a book basically about women's history as an undergraduate, and I just thought to myself, I must know more about that. And so I did. I did my undergraduate dissertation on Sheela-Na-Gigs, and it's been a lifelong obsession thereafter.
Excellent.
But yeah.
And so where's it taken you to?
Oh goodness, all over the place, mainly Ireland. The highest concentration of Sheilas is in Ireland. But yeah, just around gigging.
Okay, and for the uninitiated, what does it actually represent?
A Sheela-Na-Gig can best be described as a carving of a woman. They're generally found on churches and castles, perhaps not the places you'd imagine, but a woman displaying her vulva or vagina for all to see, essentially.
So a celebration, a representation of the eternal and divine feminine?
Perhaps that's one theory on what they are and why they exist. Their history is very hazy. We don't actually know why they were carved because, sadly, no one wrote it down to tell us. We do have sort of folk legends and things that surround them and why they might have been there, but so far no consensus.
And what are the folk legends say?
Oh goodness, there are some that say that it's a token to avert the evil eye. There are some that say she actually represents a class of women in rural Ireland who was basically hired in or given money to come and get rid of evil spirits in your house by displaying herself. There are theories that it's a representation of the sin of lust. But there are lots of different theories.
That sounds a bit like kind of Catholic overtones there, but
some of them, but most of them are found on Catholic churches.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, very.
But of course, you've got the usurpation of pagan sites by the Catholic and indeed the wider Christian Church, anyway. So perhaps there's a correlation there.
Perhaps there is. I think her wider meaning definitely dates back to an earlier period. But the interesting thing is that most Sheilas seem to have been carved sort of in the 12th century, which rather uncomfortably for many Christians puts her firmly within Christian iconography. And there are many theories as to why that is. But yeah, it's a definite mystery and sometimes makes people uncomfortable, but I think she's brilliant.
Well, I think, it's kind of the phallocentric nature of the great faiths. So Judeo-Christian and Muslim faiths tend to drift away from the divine feminine. So anything that kind of brings that back into sharp focus, you're right, it does tend to make a lot of people uncomfortable because we're brought up in a counterculture to that.
Especially in such blatant fashion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for you then, how far afield have you gone to discover these? Obviously Ireland, but...
The highest concentration is in Ireland. There are several throughout Britain. There are even a few examples of them in Scottish Islands and one in Norway. Thankfully for me, I live right in the middle of all of it, so it's easy to sort of come back and forth. But I suppose I did come from the States to research them and to learn more about them. But,
and the Norwegian ones, would you say, are you able to date them? Which are the earliest ones?
Same sort of period, 12th century mainly. They continued to be made in Ireland right up until the early 17th century when they abruptly stopped with the beginning of the Reformation in that area.
And the rise of Puritanism.
Yes.
Yeah. Which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So, I mean... In the sense of the overall Megalithomania, if you like, which brings us all here, can you draw parallels with other aspects of ancient culture? Do you see the same thing in ancient Babylon or ancient Sumer, for instance?
You do see similar carvings in places like India, sort of women displaying themselves, but I think the context in this sense is specifically Irish in origin. There have been theories by other historians who have suggested a continental origin, but that doesn't really make sense when you think about the fact that the highest concentration is in Ireland and the most intact legends surrounding her are in Ireland. In fact, there was even a British naval vessel called the HMS Sheela-Na-Gigs
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. But she was captured soon after her her launch, so we don't hear much about her thereafter.
When was this?
That was in the, oh goodness, I think 1700s.
Oh, I know.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, interesting. So, taking the slightly wider view of ancient cultures and ancient civilization, from which obviously this is a part, can you perhaps draw parallels with Earth energies and how this perhaps can be measured? And by that I mean, obviously, as you say, that we've got a concentration in Ireland and Norway. And perhaps there's an allusion to the Indian culture and the Indian subcontinent. But is there room to consider it as a spread of a global culture from those areas and outwards?
I don't think so. I think this particular figure relates specifically to Irish Celtic myth and culture, which of course I'll explain more about in my talk. Don't want to give too much away.
Yes, no, looking forward to that hugely. And of course there are those that would suggest that the Awa, the Atlantis, has one foot at least in ancient Irish culture.
Yes, there are some who would definitely say that. I think Sheela-Na-Gig derives mainly from the idea of sovereignty and the idea of ruling clans and things in that area.
Okay.
So, yes.
So, of course, the power of the divine feminine, but also the power of the feminine in early cultures within the British Isles, particularly I'm thinking of midwifery, for instance, which was arguably stamped out by the Christian Church because it represented a threat to the power base. Do you suppose that has a component element?
I know that I'm a doula, a birth and postnatal doula, which means that I am hired by families or women to go with them when they give birth. And on more than one occasion I have used images of Sheela-Na-Gigs to help illustrate to women the idea of sort of peaceful opening.
Wow.
And I do know that works. She may certainly have some role or focus in midwifery, but we'll never know. Unfortunately, that's lost to us. But I think in the same way that Sheela-Na-Gigs are still revered in some parts of Ireland, and they're still an integral part of the church architecture, and there still are folk legends and traditions about them, I'm not really sure you can argue that midwifery was stamped out either. I think perhaps it changed. I mean, in fact, there was a period in the Middle Ages when midwives were given the power by the church to christen babies and give last rites. So I think there wasn't quite as much of a struggle as traditionally believed.
That's interesting. Because, the birth of modern obstetrics could be traced back to the birth of modern, what I call industrial medicine, if you like. So the point at which childbirth and labour and indeed pregnancy was taken over from the traditionally female roles of guidance and care and moved into a very male-dominated society.
Yes, well, it stopped being seen as a natural, healthy process like breathing or, any bodily function, and it started to be seen as a medical event.
Something that
and
needed
an
to be
emergency,
cured.
Which it's not.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Anyone
No.
who's been privileged enough to witness a normal birth will be able to tell you that it doesn't really need much assistance.
No, not a lot. No, indeed. No, I concur entirely. So for you then, what would you like to see in terms of bringing the greater knowledge that this represents?
I think I would like to see people not be quite so disgusted or afraid of them at first glance. I mean, I think they appeal to an enlightened sort of people who look at them and just think, wow, that's, amazing. There's someone being completely, literally open and honest about what it is and what they're all about. You don't get that a lot in society these days. Everything is a bit branded and a bit hidden message. And I find that when you look at Sheela-Na-Gigs, you either really like them and are intrigued, or you're a bit repulsed and you just think, oh no, that's wrong. And I would like to see less of the latter, simply because that's part of the reason why we know so little about her.
We are inexorably finding ourselves finally and at last in the year 2012, which has been much heralded, much talked about and much feared by many people. Assuming we're all here after the 21st of December, what does the future hold for you? What would you like to be doing in 2013 and on?
Oh goodness, well, I'm getting married in June.
Congratulations.
So, yes, I shall have a stern word with any creator who deprives me of my wedding. But yeah, no, that's the next plan. Marriage, family, and hopefully continuing my research. But yeah.
Meghan Rice, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.